Materialist friends ask me this question. Why all the magical thinking, Trav? My answer to that question goes something like this. I have hovered at the edge of the observable universe, and as I hovered there, I held in my hand a cosmic melon baller of sorts, and with that cosmic melon baller, I scraped out the insides, all the stories, all the metaphors, because I thought it was the stories that were hurting me, the stories that were making me sick. At that place of the deepest rational ascent, I saw myself as a biological being, one who is a product of evolution, one who is a storyteller. To forsake the stories, I forsake the scientific story. I forsake the materialist story. So that is where the materialism falls in on itself. If I burn one book, I have to burn the others. And as Ralph Waldo Emerson indicated, a lot of times we find more truth in fiction than in what we call nonfiction. Scientific studies have shown that people with faith and people who live in faith communities actually have better health than people who do not. There are people like Franz de Waal, who wrote The Bonobo and the Atheist. He understands that religion is not something to be scorned, it is something to be understood. We need to ask ourselves the question, what has this done for us? How does it function? The absolute materialist model really is a dinosaur at this point. The unifying theory that quantum physics asks us to discover put an end to that absolute materialism. As we come to understand that time is relative, as we come to understand that one particle on one side of the universe can affect the spin of another particle on the other side of the universe simultaneously, what Einstein called spooky action, that space also is not quite as spacey as we thought it was. Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, yet somehow in our universe, communication can take place faster than the speed of light. These things which cause more questions to be asked. These observations that help us to understand that nothing is quite as solid or linear as we once thought it was. There are other realms in which our laws of physics, our Newtonian laws, do not apply. Life is not quite as cause and effect as we once thought it was. One thing can pass through another thing and never touch it. One thing can spin in one direction and in the other direction simultaneously. No matter how fast we go, light always appears to us as if it's going at the speed of light. And as we make these inquiries in our personal awakening journey, we may come to understand that none of this is quite as personal as we thought it was. That the entire universe is contained in each particular manifestation of the universe, that particular manifestation of consciousness that you call me, and that I call you, and that I call me. It turns out that reality is much more difficult to describe than we thought it would be from an absolute materialist perspective. And it turns out that everyone, including the absolute materialists, are just storytelling. We cannot divorce ourselves from the symbolic language creatures that we are. At the height of my materialism, I became quite aggressive toward the idea of God, and I could be quite belittling toward people who expressed some sense of faith. As I forgave that hurt in myself, as I allowed myself to be forgiven, and as I forgave those on the outside who seemed to have been the ones to sour that word, God, for me, as that happened, I became aware of my own hubris. I saw that I had developed the same sense of self-righteousness as a materialist that I had developed in myself as a religious fundamentalist. Ken Wilber speaks of a waking up and of a growing up. The waking up happens within a context, probably a spiritual community of sorts. And so we wake up inside a particular form. Those who devote themselves to this form will also exhaust themselves in this form. From there, there's a binary, there's a choice, a 0, a 1. Jesus was crucified because there were some men who had some kind of religious control who were feeling threatened. Their form was being threatened in this one who showed up healing. The pragmatic forms of healing the sick and opening people's eyes and hearts to deeper reality was threatening to the status quo. Some say that it is the beginnings of civilization 10,000 years ago that are represented by the symbols of the fall in the Garden of Eden. We are a cooperative and nurturing species. We compete against one another, not as much as individuals, but as tribes, as groups. With civilization, we abandoned much of our organismic sensibilities, our tribal, communal, cooperative workings, working together to survive in this world. The conveyor belt that came with the Industrial Revolution seems to have separated us from nature. We now seem to be consumers by nature. We believe ourselves to be separate from nature. It is possible to simultaneously draw from the well of religious symbolism and also scientific or rational symbolic language.